All right. Well, we're pretty much here at 7, so I'm gonna kick things off. I mean, people will continue to filter in as we proceed. Um, do if you've got questions and things, do drop them in the chat, and we can answer those as we go. Just by way of introduction, so my name's Ed. I'm a member of the Threshold Sports team. Threshold are the organization behind Endure24. I'm also an ultra runner myself. I've run a few different ultras. I was thinking about it earlier, and the longest time I've spent on my feet at a race was 23 hours 45 minutes. So I don't know if that qualifies me to talk about a 24-hour race, but I have some understanding of what might await you guys at Endure24. But I'm really lucky today to be joined by a very special guest, Tommy Lewis, who you can see on your screen. So Tommy is an ultra runner. He's a coach. He's an advocate for a healthy, sustainable approach to running. You might know him from his podcast and media platform, That's Runnable, and his social media output as well, where he really focuses on giving people good, sensible advice and not getting too caught up in a lot of the running hype, I guess. Tommy, welcome to this webinar. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me. It's good to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you. Tommy's actually taking on Endure24 this year as well as a pair, right? A pair with your friend?
Yeah, me and a pal, we're going to take it on together, see how many we can accumulate. Yeah. It'll be interesting. I've never done a race like that, never paired up and done something like that. So see how it goes, see what the tactics end up being.
It's an underappreciated challenge, I think. Rightly, the solos get a lot of respect out on course, but running as a pair, there's a degree of you've got to manage each other as well as yourself, which can be taxing. So we're going to be talking about Endure24, the UK's favourite 24-hour trail race. There'll be people on this call who I'm sure are very familiar with Endure24, and there'll be people who perhaps aren't. So I thought the best thing to do to kick things off is actually I'm going to play a video that we made last year that just sort of explains how the event works.
Endure24 is a race unlike any other. Racing non-stop against the clock. You'll have 24 hours to run as many laps of the 8-kilometer trail course as you can. That's from midday on Saturday, running all the way through the night. And finishing at midday on Sunday.
One more lap left.
Sound like a grind? Well, you don't have to run it alone. You can sign up with a team of up to 12 people running relay style day and night. Run your laps one by one, or you can double up and give your teammates the chance to rest. But the clock never stops. The smaller your team, the bigger the challenge, as you'll have less time to rest and recover in between laps. And for the ultimate challenge, why not see how far you can go in 24 hours completely solo? In between laps, you can relax and camp, or make the most of the incredible event village, where you can find food trucks, DJs, a bar, and even time for a bit of retail therapy. So what are you waiting for? Sign up now to secure your place on the start line and find out how far you'll go.
I'm excited now. I'm hyped.
Yeah, you know what, that really brought it all back. I'm really, really excited to kick off Reading in just 2 months' time. Hard to believe it's come around so quick. So as I say, do drop questions in the chat as we go, but we're going to be talking about a number of different topics. I think the first thing to say really is there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to training and strategizing for really any event, especially not an event like Endure24. We've got runners coming who are going to be part of big, large teams of 9 to 12 people. Maybe you're going to be aiming for 1 or 2 laps if you're in one of those teams. And then we've got runners who are going solo or pair like Tommy, who maybe are aiming for 10 or even 20 laps to secure their 100-mile t-shirt, the yellow t-shirt. So there are as many ways to take on Endure24 as there are people taking part. So just keep that in mind, I guess, and keep your personal goals in mind when you're kind of listening to this discussion. Tommy, perhaps on that, as you say, you're taking part as a pair this year. So to help kind of frame the discussion, I guess, what are your goals going into this race? What are you wanting to get out of it?
Well, I was on a 24-hour race this weekend, and there was someone chatting away behind me, and they were talking about this amazing event and all this all of this fanfare around the event. There were people, stands, thousands of people taking part of this. I was like, what event are you talking about? He was like, Endure24. Have you heard of it? I was like, oh, no way. I'm doing that.
No way.
And we were just talking about the atmosphere around the event. It sort of hammered home to me that my priority really is just to have fun during the event. My genuine goal is to enjoy the process. The person I am running with is a good friend of mine. We've been kind of going to mountain ultras together and taking part in sometimes the same race, but sometimes, I might do one race, he might do like another ultra as part of that event, if that makes sense. But we've been going to these races quite often, and it'd be nice to actually sort of take on something together as a pair and just see how far we can go. I mean, we will be trying to kind of take it seriously to the extent that we want to try and do well for ourselves. We want to sort of impress ourselves with how well we do, but also, want to take it lightly, psychologically. So have fun is P1.
That's one. I mean, you're a coach, you're a PT, you're used to working with clients on their fitness goals. How important is it, do you think, when you're going into a race to have a clearly defined goal, even if that goal is as simple as, have fun with it?
Really important, I think. If you're looking for a performance goal, especially a race like this, for example, I think it's really important because I think it is required. This is going to be extremely tough. Like no matter how you're approaching it, it's likely that the race itself is going to be tough, and there will be times where you'll have to ignore the emotional thoughts that you're having and ignore the doubts that you're having and try and reframe the suffering that you're going through. And that sometimes is helped by having a very clear goal. Like if you are saying to yourself, I'm trying to get 100 miles in 24 hours doing it solo, there will be times where you will be really doubting yourself. And if your goal is ambiguous, if your target is at all questionable, like, I sort of might do 24 hours, I might do 100 miles, I might try and go for that. But if it becomes hard, then maybe I'll just do 100K. If you're sort of questioning that, then during the race, you've got no chance of really going for the harder option. So if you do want to really do well, if you want to achieve like a goal that you're reaching for, I do think it's essential to decide what that is before you go in. And in the same vein, I think having fun, like if your goal is to have fun, it really is important to have that as a genuine goal for yourself, and to kind of even write it on your arm. Like you could write P1 have fun on your arm just as a reminder, because it will get serious. There will be times in the middle of the night where you're like, why are we doing this? This is stupid. Or whatever, you might just be having those thoughts throughout the night. And sometimes it is just important to crack a smile and realize that it is all for fun. It is a hobby. It's a privilege to be doing this. And that is, to me, one of the most important things you can be able to do, is to sort of zoom out, get some perspective, and realize, oh yeah, this is a choice. This is fun. There's loads of people around me. What a privilege it is to be doing this. So whatever your goal, I would have to say it's essential to kind of really decide on what that is beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. Having fun is a big part of any race, but I think at Endure24 it is priority one for everyone. Right, well, let's zoom in a little bit. I think one of the things that can catch people off guard at any race, but particularly a race that goes on for 24 hours, is pacing. Whether you're running solo, whether you're in a pair or a team, 24 hours is a long time. Pacing yourself is really, really critical. So when you're thinking about that start line and you're thinking about your goals at this race, how are you approaching pacing, and what are the kind of implications of that, I guess, if you were training for this race specifically?
It does, of course, depend on the individual, and it depends on whether you're in a team and how big your team is. If I were doing it, for the solo runners out there, I would say that it would be probably advisable to have a bit of a template of a lap. By template of a lap, I would kind of mean if there's certain sections that you think it's smarter to walk, then agree on, sort of decide on those sections in the first few laps and kind of create your template for a lap, and then just stick to that no matter what throughout the sort of 24 hours. So you could be doing, you know, I think it's advisable to actually create your own sort of rhythmic format so that you can do a lap and have a certain amount of time between each lap of rest. And then you go out and do that lap identically again, running the parts that you run and walking the parts that you walk, and having sort of following that template. The reason I say that's advisable is because in the middle of the night, when it's actually quite difficult to determine exactly kind of what sections are like going slightly uphill, it's actually more difficult to kind of make these decisions. You want to make the decisions on how you're running the lap during the day, when you can see everything, when you can see the slope coming up towards you or whatever it is. And then during the night, you can just have checkpoints throughout the lap, and you might, you know, hit a certain rock or a certain, you know, boulder or something that indicates to you, okay, this is when I start running again. And having that is going to be really helpful, because you will not want to always, you know, break into a run. And so having that kind of template just to follow, and it takes the decisions away from it. Of course, if you're, you know, if you're looking to run the whole thing, I think you're going to be an extremely capable runner, and you will have had a lot of time on the feet, and your sort of understanding of pacing will probably be, you know, already there. But for anyone who's kind of approaching this sort of distance who hasn't before, I think it is important to admit to yourself that you're not going to be able to run every lap for 24 hours. You probably will need to break into walks and have a template. For those running together, like in a pair, you know, I don't know. It's new to me. So I would say one of my biggest fears running in a pair is, you know, seizing up in the hour or so that I'm not running. You know, it'll get deep into the race. It will probably going, you know, 1 for 1. My friend will do 1 lap, I'll do 1 lap. But in the breaks, I think I'm just going to need to make sure I stay on my feet for the most part and keep moving. You know, not doing anything too taxing, but I'm not going to be doing squats for an hour whilst he does a lap. But I will be walking around, because I think the last thing I want is to be sort of seizing up before I go out and do another lap. So that's one of my biggest fears. But I think the question was about pacing, really, wasn't it? I mean, ultimately, I think finding a bit of a template and sticking to that, taking it easy and just kind of going and doing that same template of a lap over and over again is going to be kind of my way of going for it.
Yeah, and it's worth saying, if you're a runner who doesn't find a pace like 5 minutes per kilometer, 8 minutes per mile, or 9 minutes per mile, whatever, if you don't find that taxing, that's great. But it's worth remembering that after you've been on your feet for 10, 12, 16, 20 hours, a pace like that can start to feel pretty taxing. So I think we had a conversation once with the men's course record holder, Joe Baker, who ran 150 miles at Endure, and he was walking from lap 1 up the hills. So just keep that in mind. If you're powering up a hill, it was good enough for Joe to walk, so it's probably good enough for you. We've got a question here from Mark, and it kind of ties into my next question about hill training. Similarly, speed training as well. For a 24-hour race, it might be tempting to think, I don't need to do any workouts, I just need to be doing lots of slow running. Where do you see speed work, hill work, all that kind of stuff in a training program? And before you answer, I'm just going to change onto a different Wi-Fi network because I'm getting a bit laggy. So if I disappear for a second, guys, that's what's happening. But Tommy, speed work.
Yeah, I think one of the most common misconceptions about ultra running is that no speed work is required. It is really important to be throwing in some speed work into your training. It's not necessarily because you're going to be running fast during your ultra, but it will really help with running efficiency. And so I think throwing in a bit and playing with the full range of speed in your training is helpful. We're not saying like throw in 3 threshold sessions a week by any means. I'm talking about, you know, doing some strides once a week, or throwing in an interval session, or doing some hill reps once a week, just to kind of play with that upper end of effort and really, you know, practicing running efficiency, speed, but also power output. When we're talking about like hill sprints, you're looking at a pretty safe way to increase power output, and that is ultimately a great way to build muscular strength and therefore, you know, endurance in the same way. So I would say it's probably one of the most one of the most common sort of misconceptions about ultra running is that you just need to run easy. However, your priority definitely should just be time on the feet. Like if you're training for something where you're spending a lot of time on your feet in your training, you will want to try and get as much volume in, however you're measuring that, as possible. So if you're measuring that by time, I would say that you're going to want to, have a decent amount of time per week on your feet. It might be some walk runs. It might be that you're including walking in that time. However you're measuring your volume, whether it's distance, time, or whatever. Time on the feet is such an important sort of aspect to that. One of the reasons I've got a standing desk is because just I'm spending more time on my feet is a helpful thing. So I'm stood here barefoot on my feet whilst I'm here, and I think that's helpful in some capacity.
I'm sat down with shoes on, so I feel pretty bad right now. Benjamin asks about the elevation gain per lap. I can see Harry from the Threshold team has answered you, Benjamin, but just to clarify, at Reading and Leeds, the elevation is the same per lap, about 100 meters or 300 feet, but the distribution is quite different. So at Reading, there's a couple of hills where that elevation is kind of packed in a bit more dramatically, whereas at Leeds, it's distributed quite evenly throughout the course. So the general wisdom is that Leeds is a slightly faster course, but they do both have the same amount of elevation, and they're obviously the same distance as well. Let's talk about rest and recovery then, because you touched on it there. As a pair, you're going to have a fair amount of downtime, but it's not going to last that long each time. So it's something that catches people by surprise a lot is, getting started running after your body has had a sit down, had some food. So is that something that you would recommend people factor into their training, do you think, Tommy, that period off the course where they're able to rest and recover?
Yeah, it could be. Definitely. I think it would be helpful to kind of do some dry runs. If you're in my situation where you're going to be spending an hour of not running, or if you're working with a team and there's just going to be a lot of time between your runs, it might be helpful to sort of simulate that in your training in some way. I think sometimes, doubling up runs in a day could be a fun way to do it. It means you are going for a run in the morning, you're eating throughout the day, you're digesting food, and then you're going for another run later on essentially what are not completely recovered legs. That could be a helpful way to do things. But again, like, I think it is important to sort of stress that you, throughout your training, it's really important to just avoid overtaxing your body. And I think a lot of people can, when you're approaching a race like this, which is ultimately really quite challenging, it's, for a lot of people, they'll be out there for a huge amount of time, whether if you're in a pair or if you're doing it solo, you're going to be at minimum 12 to 24 hours out there running. So it's a lot. It's very taxing on the body, and you're not going to be able to go and like practice that in your training. A marathon block, you'll be able to practice what it feels like to run kind of marathon pace for a very long distance for 75% of the distance you'll be doing on the day, for example. Very clinical in that sense. This is different. You're not going to be able to completely get to a point where you feel confident that you can complete it necessarily. So don't overthink that sort of stuff. Don't think that you have to run 80 miles if you're going to complete a 100 miler. It doesn't work like that. Trust that the volume you accumulate over time will have huge impact on your performance on the day. Accumulating volume and what you've been doing so far in your training, all of the work you've been putting in so far, that matters a huge amount. Of course, yes, it's important to be doing long runs. You might want to do double up runs on a weekend, for example, where you do sort of 2 medium to long runs on a Saturday and Sunday. That is helpful stuff if your body is ready for it, if it's got a good base. But don't overthink it. Don't think you have to go on like a 50k run before this race. That's not necessary. It's actually most necessary to make sure your body is in good nick and you get to the start line feeling fresh.
Words. I have heard of people taking their weekend long run, maybe a half marathon, and breaking it up into 3 runs with a gap in between, which can be a good way to simulate it. But as you say, 12 hours in, things are going to feel quite different. You mentioned food there. There's a lot of it at Endure24, and I would always encourage people to make the most of the food that's available. But it is a race as well, and normally when we race, we do our running and then we do our eating. So how important would you say it is to train your stomach, I guess, when you're taking on races like this?
Yeah, it is really important. It's quite difficult to give blanket advice on nutrition, but on kind of how your individual body is going to respond to certain nutrition on race day. The person, for example, that I am running with has had, a lot of problems with his stomach throughout his ultra runs of the last couple of years. And he's been working with a nutritionist, and he's been doing a lot of very specific stuff for him. He will probably not be going to the pizza place and, having a pizza in the middle of the race, that because he knows from experience that he can't just be shoving down a bunch of kind of dairy product or whatever it is. So it's going to be different for everyone, so I can't give blanket advice, but what I will say is that it is important to eat from very early on. So I would say my kind of rule of thumb is sort of little and often, frequently eating throughout the race. I would personally, you have a great opportunity with this looped format to eat every time you come back to the start line, to the aid station. Every time you complete a loop, it's time to eat. And you don't necessarily have to take heaps out with you, but you might want to take something to keep you going through the loop. But the advantage here on this race is that you don't have to carry a huge amount, but it is important to be eating on every loop. So it depends what works for you. I think it is important to practice with nutrition before your race. So use your long runs to practice with whatever fueling you have, whatever products you're using, whether it's a carb mix, whether it's like certain electrolytes, if you're using gels maybe, or maybe you want to do a loop at home and then come back and have a burrito and wait for 15 minutes, then go back out on a run, see how it feels. I think there are ways to practice that, and that can be some of the most valuable stuff to really learn how you individually, how your stomach deals with certain products, whether you're eating animal products, whether you're not eating animal products. Like, how do you deal with, maybe you've got like a protein bars and there's a certain brand that your stomach just doesn't like. This stuff is better to understand before you go into a race, because when you're in the middle of a race and you can't stomach anything, then it's quite difficult. So I would say little and often, eat early. The other thing I would also say is, this is a rule for me anyway, it tends to work. Intuitive eating is not always like the best advice to give, but I do think that when you're in the middle of a race and you don't know what you feel like, whatever kind of looks appetizing is likely to be a good go-to. So if you look at a pack of salt and vinegar crisps and it's all you want, have those salt and vinegar crisps. Eat the salt and vinegar crisps, because it will be, your body does have an ability to kind of know what it needs. If it needs some salt and you look at something salty, it will probably look appetizing. So if you are struggling to kind of see anything that understand exactly what you need technically in that moment, try and be intuitive with it. Try and kind of lean into what you feel like. But that's not always perfect advice, because sometimes your stomach will get it wrong. But that's a good rule of thumb for me anyway. I kind of tend to lean into what I feel like in the moment.
Yeah, 100%. And that difference between people, it's not just it's really measurable. Like, you can do things like salt tests and sweat tests, and I know, for instance, that I sweat quite a lot of liquid, but not a huge amount of salt is in my sweat. So I know that I have to drink quite a lot of water, but I don't have to take on a huge amount of salt. I know runners who are the opposite. They can get by on 250 ml of water an hour, but they need to be taking on 1,000 milligrams of salt in that fluid. So even at that level of just like basic macros and things, it's really, there's a huge difference between people.
Yeah, and on the hydration front as well, sipping on water throughout, it's very easy to forget to hydrate if you don't necessarily feel thirsty.
Yeah.
I'm quite constantly just taking a small mouthful of water and then like another small mouthful of some electrolyte mix or something, and I'm just sort of throwing it in there slowly. It's not necessarily that I'm guzzling a whole bottle at the aid station, but I'm just sort of consistently fueling. And I think that's the best way for me. That's always worked for me. shoving loads into my mouth and just sort of overloading and trying to feed my body. My body is already, I'm demanding a lot of my body. Throwing loads of food into it is going to demand even more. And so I think it's important to kind of be gentle. It's gentle with your pacing and gentle with your nutrition.
That's it. Well, let's talk about another unique factor of Endure24 then, night running, which we got a lot of questions on. A good chunk of this race takes place at night. It is in the middle of summer, but it's still 6+ hours of darkness. So I guess at sort of top level, how do you just advise people sort of prepare themselves for that?
Yeah, so I ran this weekend in the darkness for the best part of 10 hours, and it's tough. It's really tough. It changes your whole kind of perspective on things. And all I would say, I think all I would say is there's a difference between suffering and pain. You will be in a very uncomfortable situation. It's going to hurt. But it's only really suffering if you kind of add this psychological aspect to it, where you create this narrative that it's a really negative thing that you're doing. Ultimately, when we look at this event, you're surrounded by people. You are extremely safe. It's the same loop every time. Nothing bad is going to happen. You have chosen to do this, and the pain you're feeling is probably like a 3 out of 10. Like, it's not all that bad. You can endure it. So you're in this sort of situation where you're tasked with a psychological challenge. And that psychological challenge is to change the narrative. It's to change the narrative from, oh, it's dark, this sucks, I'm in pain, this hurts, to something more positive. Like, actually, I can endure this. This isn't actually that bad. It's kind of cool that it's dark. I've got people left and right of me. How cool is it that we're doing this? Maybe even zoom out and kind of imagine an aerial view of the entire event. How is it that I'm doing this right now in the middle of, like, somewhere out in Reading or in Leeds, whichever you're doing? Sometimes it's just it's a practice of changing how you're seeing it, rather than actually trying to deal with whatever you're dealing with as a problem. So I do think it's a kind of a switch and a change of perspective on what you're going through. A lot of people will stop doing what they're doing. They will give up because they have been overcome by this narrative of suffering, when in reality they had a lot more in them. It was just that they thought that they didn't. And so I think in the night, that's what will sort of get you struggling the most. And then within a matter of hours, the sun will come up, and you will be a different person when the sun comes up. When you've endured the night and the sun rises, it's like you've had like 3 caffeine pills, and all of a sudden you're just a new person. So I do think through the night it's essential to just remain positive, crack a smile, keep the perspective, keep control of the perspective, and don't let the darkness change how you feel.
How much of a difference does that was excellent advice, by the way, 100% the case. How much does training in the darkness help, do you think? Like, obviously the evenings are now getting lighter, but going out for runs when it is dark, particularly on trails and things, obviously navigation is not really a problem at Endure24, but just generally getting comfortable in the dark.
I think it can help. All these things, like, you can always practice stuff that you'll do on race day in training. Of course, it's going to help. But whether training in the dark is essential, I don't know. I think personally, it's not necessary, because for me, the excitement of the event, the camaraderie, the kind of people around you, all of that sort of stuff, most people are going to be able to deal with the darkness in that situation. I actually think training in the dark alone out on some trails is a much more challenging thing than Endure24 is going to be in that aspect, in that sort of regard. If you're out there on the trails in the darkness by yourself, kudos to you, because that's far more challenging than, even if you're like not aching that much, I think that's far more psychologically challenging than doing a loop with hundreds of others at a sort of festival experience in the summer during the dark. So I would say if you're not someone who likes training in the dark, don't worry about it. Like it would be fun on the day actually. And I think that if you've never done it before, it might be quite a novel experience that you'll enjoy, and you shouldn't be that daunted by the darkness unless you have a particular fear of the darkness, but this could help.
Yeah, 100%. Just embrace it. That's definitely good advice. Yeah. And at Endure24 in the night, the fairies do come out, and if you've run the race before, you may have seen them. So look forward to that. A question from Jack, which I thought was quite interesting. He's running as a four-person team. Even though it's only a 5-mile loop, would you still take a vest with water and electrolytes? I mean, I guess, Jack, that probably depends on your goals, right? If you're running a loop in 35 minutes, probably all right. But if you're taking over an hour, I mean, what would be your thoughts, Tommy?
Yeah, completely up to you. I was saying to someone over the weekend that it's not always necessary to take something with you, especially in the race that I did. Like the first sort of few hours wasn't necessary, but there was something we agreed that there was something about having the vest on that kind of makes you feel safe. Like you know, at least if things go badly, you know, if something does happen in the middle of the course, at least you do have your you got a bit of sugar and you've got some water and stuff. Like if it makes you feel more prepared and makes you feel safe and cool. If you don't like wearing a vest and you'd rather not, then I there's definitely no reason to. But yeah, it is personal preference, and I don't think you're going to get funny looks if you're wearing a vest at this event.
Much like a marathon, I think, Jack. Some people wear vests for big city marathons because they have reasons for that, and some people don't. So it's totally up to you. Just on sleep and sleep deprivation, it's obviously a hard thing to train and prepare for, probably not a safe thing to train and prepare for. But we had a question from Ben, who's a solo runner, but he is going to be taking some time off the course to sleep. And he's wondering whether several short naps would be better or one long sleep. I mean, do you have any thoughts around physiologically or psychologically, any thoughts around that? Or do you think it does come down to sort of personal taste?
It could come down to personal taste. I mean, I'm not massively knowledgeable on sleep, but what I do know is that I think like having a bit of a longer sleep would probably be more effective. If it you know, it's just one night. I don't know what he's kind of thinking in terms of what do his short sleeps look like versus his long sleep. If he's looking at like short sleeps being 4 15-minute sleeps versus 1 hour sleep, that's I mean, that's difficult to say. But if we're comparing like 4 1-hour sleeps with a 4-hour sleep, I'd probably just go for the 4-hour sleep, get a decent kip in, and then like get started again. And you could even get most of the night out of the way. But yeah, it depends. I don't know because I'm not someone who has slept on a like 24-hour event. I did speak to one of the former record holders. I think he was like the New Zealand record holder for a while, or even the world record holder for the backyard ultra for a little bit. And he told me that like sleep is one of these things where if you feel like you should sleep, like if you're nodding off and stuff, it can be extremely powerful to just get a sleep in. To like if it's sort of 15, 20 minutes or even 10 minutes, if you feel like sleeping, it could be the thing that just changes the game for the next few hours. Whereas trying to fight through it might be kind of 5-6 hours of just slogging away and, you know, really not being that productive with your running. So personally, I would say if I needed a sleep, like this weekend, for example, I had everything ready in case I needed a sleep. I decided I didn't at any stage, but if I needed to kind of just, if I was nodding off as I walked or something like that, I probably would have taken a nap. But yeah, like difficult one to say. It depends on kind of what he's thinking a short sleep is and what a long sleep is. I don't know if I would go with like, for example, with just 10-minute sleeps. If you're gonna sleep, I think you know, you probably want to get a proper sleep in of some kind. But yeah, that's a kind of guesswork from me.
The sort of thing you have to discover as you go, I suppose. Question in the chat from Benjamin, who I don't know if that's the same Ben, but how close to the start finish line will your gear be? If you're a solo runner, Ben, then it will be pretty close. We prioritize solo runner access because obviously these are the people who probably need access to their stuff without having to walk 5-10 minutes to the larger camps that are for teams. So solos and pairs will have slightly closer access. Oh, we have the Ben, the sleep chat Ben in the chat. He says a short sleep might be 30 or 40 minutes versus a big block of a couple of hours. There you go. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd say if you wanna, I would say a couple of hours would be probably better. Just get one decent sleep in, and then crack on. Yeah.
You do hear stories from sort of bigger, longer ultras that people taking even 5 minutes to sleep on the trail can just reset your brain and reset your mind.
Yeah, there's a famous clip of Courtney Dauwalter talking about taking a 2-minute nap and feeling like a new person when she woke up. That's nuts.
Exactly.
But yeah.
Something mysterious goes on physiologically.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps on that, I mean, one of the challenges at Endure24 really is all down to mindset. You've talked quite a lot about perspective and the importance of mental resilience, I suppose, and having fun with it. So do you have any recommendations for how people can kind of prep that going in, particularly when they're doing their training, how they can sort of get themselves in the right mindset for taking on this race?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken about reframing suffering, reframing discomfort, and making sure that you're controlling the narrative. And if you're seeing your physical pain and the situation you're in as a negative thing, then it will be because you've said it is. But the opposite is true. If you don't see it like that, then it can actually vastly improve the experience you're going through. Most suffering is psychological; it's not actually physical. But I would also say that when it's hard, and this is the same for in your training, when it's hard, it's important to remember that there's a big reason why we do it, and that is that it's hard. It's supposed to be hard. We're not doing this great, amazing challenge and hoping it's easy. We are actually hoping it's hard because we gain the most from it being really difficult, a serious challenge, something that demands more of us than anything's ever demanded before. For something to actually demand more from us than ever before, it has to be the hardest thing you've done. And so it will suck. So in those moments where it sucks and you don't want to do another lap and you're fighting with yourself, remember that it's supposed to be like that. Like it's supposed to really, really suck. And there is a way to have a positive kind of attitude towards the fact that it's really difficult. On top of that, there will be unexpected things that happen. Part of ultra running is problem solving. And so you should expect the unexpected. This weekend, I won't go into the details, but something very unexpected happened. And it was a bit of a chafe going on. And it was horrible chafe. And I was like, oh, man, I just didn't expect this. And I wasn't fully prepared. And I had to do stuff to problem solve. Obviously it sucked. It was not good. It was kind of ruining each lap. But that also was something that I was kind of like, okay, I'm glad this has happened. I've learned my lesson. I'm also glad it's happened because it made it much more difficult. And the fact that it was more difficult made it even more valuable for me. Like, I don't know I can maybe just speak for myself, but I know a lot of ultra runners do this for deeper reasons than just performance. This is a process of self-discovery. It's something that is going to be massively valuable for you as an individual. And the only way that it's valuable for you as an individual is if it is extremely difficult. And so be grateful for the fact that it's difficult. If you're finding it tough, if you're really struggling, good. That's how it's supposed to be. And there might be other people left and right of you who are just better at hiding it, but everyone's there in solidarity, suffering away, and we're all in it together. And that's what makes it like a beautiful thing.
Said, let's clip that, put that on social media. I think your point earlier was so valid as well, the difference between suffering and pain. And it's very often the case that you confuse one for the other, and you can almost sort of step outside yourself and observe the suffering and think, is this as bad as I'm making it? And 99% of the time it's just not, right?
Yeah, I was with someone this weekend who inspirational dude. He was 23 years old, had only ever run 53K before, and he ended up completing the race, the 24-hour race. So he clocked up over 100 miles, and he was like someone that just really needed to reframe how he was seeing things. And as soon as he realized that actually I was also in pain next to him, and actually it was more just the narrative that was going through his head, like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done, but also, okay, it's supposed to be hard. And I asked him at one point, like, out of 10, how much pain, like, really just think about the sensation in your legs right now. Out of 10, honestly, 10 being like excruciating pain, what are you feeling? And he was like, oh, it's maybe like a 2 or a 3. I was like, exactly, man. That's fine. And then later on in the race, he said, I think it's got up to a 4 now. But it's not usually, it's not that bad. Yeah. Ultimately, the sort of ache, there's a difference between, a bit of ache and a bit of pain and injury. So be aware of that, of course, if you are feeling something that could definitely get worse. But most of the time, the pain you're experiencing isn't that bad. You're just kind of, it's framed around this whole kind of idea that you've run 100K and you should be feeling awful and no one ever does this. And really, it's psychological, mostly the sort of suffering side of things.
Yeah. Let's pivot then and talk about some tips, because we had a few bits of question around this. So question from Jack: first time doing Endure24, what is the most overlooked bit of kit that can really make a difference on the day/night? I mean, your 24-hour race, maybe it would have been some Vaseline, I don't know.
Vaseline.
What do you recommend?
Vaseline.
Just any sort of hidden, unexpected things that people might think about packing?
Yeah, extra socks and talc, like talcum powder, baby powder, that sort of thing. I think that can be helpful. I always forget that. Vaseline or some sort of anti-chafe thing. The reason I say Vaseline is because it's actually helpful. Vaseline is actually quite helpful after you've got the chafe going on. A lot of other anti-chafe stuff is to prevent chafe, right? It's not actually going to help when it's too late, whereas Vaseline can be a nice soother. What else?
We've had people bring foot baths, like little foot spas, which work for them, keep their feet nice and clean. They always say it's feet and eat, isn't it, in ultra running? If you can look after your feet, you're going to be in a happier place.
Yeah, another thing that I sometimes bring is like either a golf ball or like a lacrosse ball, which I've got a lacrosse ball, but it's not actually a lacrosse ball, but it's like a hard exercise ball kind of thing. And I just roll the arches of my feet over that. I'll be bringing one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a similar question, which I guess you had to navigate on Saturday into Sunday. But Rebecca was asking any tips for a first timer doing it without a crew. And I guess that kind of self-management, I presume she's a solo runner here. That kind of self-management can be really important. So I guess, I mean, you're doing it with a friend, right? But he's not exactly going to be your crew. When you're not running, he's going to be running. So how are you approaching that kind of self-care?
Yeah, so I would say a couple of things. Every time you're out on the loop, think about what you want to do when you get back. Like think ahead. So when you're approaching, or you might be having a certain issue. Maybe you are too hot, and so you're like, right, one of the things I'm going to do when I get back is going to delayer. I'm going to change to this top. It might be that you have realized you're low on water and you're carrying water. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to refill. I'm going to eat, thinking about what you're going to eat. Oh, okay, this time round, I'm going to have my peanut butter jelly sandwich. Thinking like that is helpful because you get into the aid station, and instead of just sort of being a bit dazed and like, what am I doing again? And actually spending a lot of time, wasting a lot of time at the aid station, you can be very direct. You can know exactly what you want to do. Another thing I would say that I sort of didn't get right for the first few laps this weekend, and then one lap organized everything, was just tidiness and organization at your aid station. When you have so much stuff, you'll have loads of food, you'll have changes of clothes, maybe you have spare socks, you'll have talcum powder, like we just said, maybe you'll have creams or balms or whatever else. You want to be organized with where everything is. The last thing you want when you're 18 hours in to an ultra marathon and your head is not working and you just want to get what you need to get is to be foggy, like is to not have everything in the right place, is to be searching for stuff, and you'll get frustrated, you won't be able to find it, you'll be wasting time. So try as much as you can to keep your little station tidy and organized in a way that makes sense to you. It doesn't have, there's no perfect solution. You might pair up certain things that I wouldn't, but just think about what you think makes sense and sort that out. So it might be that you spend like a few minutes every time just making sure that your aid station is tidy when you leave. I think that sort of discipline is helpful.
100%. I think as ultra runners, we get very used to knowing what's in my left pocket on my vest, what's in my right pocket, what's in the back, what's in my waistband. Applying that same level of discipline to your drop bag or your tent or whatever it is can pay dividends for sure.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we are coming up on time. I'm conscious that people may have questions. So if you do have any more, drop them in the chat. I've just got one that Sven submitted in advance, which I know, Tommy, you're training for a 100-miler at the moment, and he's just asked how many miles would you see as necessary to build up for a miler? So do you have any thoughts? I mean, I guess it depends on your background, your pace, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd say you want like 5 or 6. Ideally, you want like 5 or 6 weeks of anywhere between like 120 and 160 kilometers per week, really. I'm going to be trying to get to 100-mile weeks by June, and my 100-miler is in July. So it is important to get a lot of volume in. But in terms of the long runs, well, you're not going to be doing like 30% of that weekly volume in a long run, but you might be doing sort of marathons as long runs, or there might be one point where you do a couple of 50Ks. That would be amazing if you could get up to that, but it's not completely necessary. It might be that you double up your weekends and you have 2 long runs on a Saturday and a Sunday. I'll be doing that. I think I'll be doing like 60K over the weekend, for example, doing a 30K and a 30K, or I could do like a 35 and a 25 or something like that. But you definitely don't have to be doing 50Ks every weekend to run a 100-miler. But the overall volume should be quite high. Yeah.
From Liam, which I thought was quite a unique one, and we may end on this just because it's quite an interesting one. Liam says, "This will be my first event of this kind. How do I prevent myself from getting bored? I am deaf in one ear, so listening to music whilst I run is hard for me, as I then don't have the other ear to hear sounds around me." Tommy, thoughts on music in general for training as a tool for endure, and then I guess tapping into that point around mental resilience, tips for not getting bored.
Yeah. Music is a great tool, I think, to put your mind off stuff, and so I would use it if you want to, but I would wait for a very long time until you really need it. That's my way of doing things, and I think the general consensus amongst a lot of ultra runners is to use the tool of music when you need it the most, because you don't really want to be listening to music the whole time, and it can get quite annoying. I've had times where I don't know what tunes I want, and everything's annoying me, and so I've just turned it off, and then I realized that's actually just the natural sound of my surroundings is what I needed. So use it wisely. It can be helpful, but use it as a tool rather than just like, oh, I'm scared I'm going to be bored. And then on the topic of boredom, I would say that the wrong thing to try and do is avoid boredom. One of the beauties of running is that it forces us to be alone with ourselves. It forces us, rather than the rest of the world and everything we're doing and constantly running away from boredom and picking up our phones and satiating ourselves with distraction. Actually, it forces us to be with ourselves for a bit, and I think there's some value in just embracing the kind of boring nature of putting one foot in front of the other. It will not be that boring at Endure24. I have not done it, but all reports say that it's a very not boring event. Like there's going to be a lot going on. It's only like an hour or so, or an hour and a half, at a time on your own with your thoughts. I think you can overcome whatever boring feelings you have in the moment. Just try and be in the moment. Try and kind of just be in that present moment. Hone in on your surroundings. Maybe be conscious of the sounds. Be conscious of how your legs feel, how the floor feels under your feet. Do a bit of mindfulness. Just all of these sort of regular ways to overcome boredom is just by being a little bit more present. Really, boredom is just because you wish you were somewhere else. You're thinking of not the place you are. You're thinking of being somewhere else. I wish I was, being entertained by something. I wish I was at the aid station already. And you find it boring because again, it's this control of the narrative. I think if you just sort of try and silence the thoughts. Someone said to me this weekend, he ran past, he was like, "How you doing? How you getting on?" I was like, "Yeah, good, just trying to think less." Because like you could get lost in your own thoughts and so, and actually really I just want to think less so that time flies a little bit, and I try and do that by just being a little bit more present and just focusing on the breath, focusing on the rhythm of my feet, and embracing the fact that it's quite boring.
I run a very fast runner on a podcast talking about how he tries not to think, partly for that reason, but also because your brain literally uses calories. And if your mind's racing and doing maths on splits, you actually are burning more calories, and that actually does affect your running. So
use as little energy as possible.
100%. Well, perhaps on that we should send everyone away to spend a bit of time with themselves and with their thoughts, and maybe get out for a run before the session goes down. Tommy, super grateful for your time. If people want to find out more about you and your podcast and things, where can they go? Where would you send them?
So I'm Tommy Run PT is my handle on the social medias, and That's Runnable is the sort of coaching and the podcast. So That's Runnable is the name of the podcast, and that'srunnable.com is the website to go check that out if you feel like it.
Good mantra to have at Endure24. That's runnable.
Yeah, run the runnable.
Yeah. All right. Well, cheers, Tommy, and thank you everyone for joining us, and see you all at Endure24, if not before.